Welcome back to day 3 of ALEC TV here at the 46th annual meeting in Austin, Texas. I'm Tom McLaughlin, and I'm here with Todd Gaziano from the Pacific Legal Foundation. How you doing today?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Glad to be here. So, PLF, I was talking to you earlier, had some pretty interesting things happen on the legal front in the last couple months here. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
We certainly have. Actually, the last few years. We just won,
great.
But the one that I think we both should talk about is we just won our 12th Supreme Court victory.
Wow.
And we won 2 last year, and we won 6 of our last 12 in the last 6 years. But the one just in June is exciting because we've been trying to overturn a bad decision in the Supreme Court that it issued 30 years ago. We've been working on it for 20 years, and we just succeeded and got the Supreme Court to better protect property rights.
Can you tell me a little bit more about this case? Because that seems really, really interesting that you got them to gain 30 years of precedent.
Certainly. For 30 years ago, the Supreme Court wrongly said that if a state or local government takes your property and won't compensate you, you can't bring the suit in federal court, despite the fact that there's a federal statute that allows that. They said you got to go to, the state court that is biased in favor of the state government. And rather than try to somehow go around that, for 20 years we just said that's wrong. And we finally got the Supreme Court to agree, and the name of the case is Nick versus Scott Township. We represented Mrs. Rose Nick, and she beat her town, who passed an ordinance that said that anyone could enter her property 365 days a year if they wanted to, her farm, her 60-acre farm, if they wanted to look for a burial site.
Really? That sounds kind of curious to me.
Well, it's very curious. The busybodies in her town had decided that maybe there was an ancient Indian burial ground, and our response is, well, if you want to enter her property, you have to pay her for it.
I'd say so.
And she probably wouldn't have said, she would have said no, well, whether there's an Indian burial ground or not. But the town passed this crazy ordinance, and then when she filed in federal court, the old federal rule applied and said, oh, nope, you can't bring that complaint for compensation in federal court. And we knew that rule, and we kept appealing and kept appealing, and we've been bringing cases to the Supreme Court. This is how public interest litigation works. You've got to be strategic about it. You got to get the right client, and Rose Nick was the right client with the right problem. And we had, asked the Supreme Court to review this for many years. They finally granted it, and they finally wiped out that. They said it was a 30-year mistake. And now if someone takes your property and won't pay you compensation, you can go either to state court if you want, or to federal court, where you're probably going to get a more fair trial against the local government.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations on the win. But aside from protecting the property rights of hardworking Americans, you also, at the Pacific Legal Foundation, run something called the Center for the Separation of Powers. That's correct?
Correct. I'm the director of a new center, and what we've decided is that, we've been litigating against this bad practice or that bad practice, but we needed to focus more seriously on the entire infrastructure that creates these bad regulations that interfere with property rights or liberty or free speech. And so the Center for the Separation of Powers helps, communicate best practices with other groups and helps inform our litigation.
Absolutely. And you're more working on reining in the administrative state and putting the power back in the hands of legislators?
That's correct. And that's why I'm here today. So
let's talk about that.
Rather than, yes, we need to fight the federal Leviathan, but Congress is broken.
Right.
And, we're going to continue to sue the federal government, but the states are the laboratories of democracy. And the states have also some of the same problems. For decades, the legislators of many states gave away too much of their lawmaking power to regulatory agencies.
Absolutely.
And guess what the regulatory agencies did?
Made a whole lot of rules.
They kept growing and growing. You're right. Millions of mandates. And they kept growing and growing and growing. And so I am glad to join the Civil Justice Task Force and to help be the private sector chair of the new administrative law subcommittee. And what we want to do is promote the existing ALEC model legislation to the states to help rein in the regulatory excess and restore the democratic authority to the legislature. And we're going to investigate some new reforms, new model legislation. And I've been so excited to meet with legislators this week.
Awesome. I mean, it really is. It's a great place for it, you know? So tell me about what you guys, like, just a couple of the approaches that you guys are taking towards combating the administrative state.
Sure. Well, we've got to, first of all, fix the process going forward. And that involves, being more careful about not giving the legislators power to the regulatory state. And when they do regulate, make sure the process includes cost-benefit analysis, other analysis of impacts.
Economic burdens and such. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is judicially reviewable so citizens can challenge whether it was done right. But we also need to fix this huge backlog of regulation. And so some states have sunset review procedures. And so we're looking at the best models that we might come up with one that other states can follow. There's regulatory budgets that require one in and two out.
Right.
There are regulatory cost caps. And there's a lot of other procedures that states can do to reset their regulatory program.
Absolutely. So in closing, I just have one more question. While you're working on all this stuff, there's tons of legislators that are out there that are working on these issues today, tomorrow, next year, next decade. What advice can you give them?
Well, number one, don't assume that everything that the state has done for decades has to be. Retain your, first, do no evil. Don't give more power to the bureaucrats. And three, remember that the people are looking to you for regulatory relief. And again, I think they get it. And the excitement around fixing their states is what's going to then lead the federal government to do the same.
Awesome. Well, Todd, I want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you being here. Todd Gaziano, keep it here for more Alec TV.